we're going to present the new Scout parent onboarding deck that I created with Mike's gracious help, trying to get some resources in slides that you guys are welcome to use for your own parent meetings, and with obvious modifications when we get there. But I would really love for this to be an interactive conversation with you folks, best practices, lessons learned. If you see something that doesn't ring true for you, absolutely call it out. I take feedback like a champ. So our agenda is going to look pretty quick. We're going to talk about the new parent perspective, the guideline for a new parent meeting, and then some topics to cover, as well as asking for help. And that's implying the soft sell for volunteers, which we all love to do. With what Scouts is, the outdoor program, the fact that we hold weekly meetings, politics of scouting sometimes, the overall concept of fundraising, and okay. Often the parents coming up from the pack or in from another troop to your troop just really need information on how your unit costs, what the expectation for fundraising is, and if there's any gear expectations, like your scout needs to own a backpack, or if the troop has gear that they can loan out. So some is like, what are the family expectations for money, how much time, gear, fundraising? They want reassurance. Honestly, they're really here to get reassurance from our leadership that their kids are safe, that they're going to have a good time, that they're going to grow up and be responsible human beings. I don't know if anybody else has any character traits that they found that parents are looking for. Hopefully they're not just looking for a babysitter, but we've all run into that too.
An outlet for homeschool and for to be honest, I've got an entire Weeblo's den that is, I'm sorry if I'm not using the correct term, and the parent doesn't seem to recognize this. It's, I have had boys with handicaps. In fact, my son became a special ed teacher because of it. But I'm running into more
fall under the special needs spectrum, and it's really about understanding and having those upfront conversations, I think, with what's expected. And if I would love every child, no matter what their struggles are, to be able to do scouting, but with that, an understanding that situation is how I see it.
Sorry.
Yes, Mike.
Sarah had raised her hand.
I apologize. I'm horrible at seeing this. Sarah, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I just didn't want to interrupt, and I'm kind of to help support, as well as like BSA policies and things like that. So that might be a good resource. But my understanding is that every council is supposed to have a special need.
Them what kind of questions and expectations you can hold parents to. So
yeah, it's
Judy, you had a question.
Important with like accommodations is their achievements, because there will be some exceptions based on their medical needs that may not apply to every scout. And that's
how our unit is run. I think it's important that new parents see a calendar. As a commissioner, I always ask for that from the unit when I'm assigned to a new unit. So if that's what you mean by how our unit is run, if they got a plan, it's really, really helpful for parents.
I think you'll see later on in the parent meeting setup, which is the next slide here, talking about like having calendars present or understanding like the digital, how we're communicating those. No problem. Our next slide is kind of the new parent meeting. So our communication goals should be to reach out to our prospective new members, their families, via email, text, call, whatever method you're getting responses back from. So we need to be concise with the details. I like the who, what, where, when meeting. Who's coming with? Is it mom? Is it dad? Is it, are they single or divorced families? Should they bring the prospective scout? That really depends for my troop, whether or not we're holding it on the same night as the older scout goes to the troop meeting, and then one of the parents stays for the parent meeting. I try and give them an understanding of how many of you, and then when is the meeting and how long will it run? Again, we're trying to reduce the cognitive load on these parents. Like the meeting starts at 7, we expect it to run about an hour. We'll open it up to a short fellowship or whatever you guys do with any of those types of communication topics. Or did I miss anything that you typically find helpful? Awesome.
I would what to expect, what our events are, how to join, and all that stuff. And so I provided that in the chat in case it's helpful for people just to have an example. But that has helped me because my emails are much shorter and I just link them to it. And then if
I would add, obviously, ideally, you would love to have everybody there in the same room, but it may be worth thinking about whether you want to have a remote component to the meeting. And if you do, then you need to think about things like microphone and making sure that people on it can see it. But that can also be a way of potentially expanding the reach of your meeting.
Good call out.
If you don't want to use it, then that's fine too. So non-presentation mode, as you can see, my screen is bouncing a little bit at the moment. But Mike, do you want to talk about the actual meeting, like some ways to make your meeting successful?
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. Funneling people into the meeting is really important. Trying to gather some information about prospective parents so that, potential recontact opportunities. So, phone number, invitations up front, and then, following up with that. Pictures and slideshows. So explaining what your troop does or what your activities are and making it look like, it's also an opportunity, part of those the handouts and things is, have a few adult applications there just in case as a handy, because I'm sure, that even as much as you're going to tell them, and then tell them again, there's still going to be questions, right? So, but having some time at the end to, present and have some, potential opportunity in order to present your troop in the correct light and, parents.
And if possible, I think another thing is to have like your SPL come in and give a port.
What we've done is actually we kind of lay the groundwork with the Weeblos Den actually several months ago. We start meeting with them. Hopefully they, we had some come on a bike outing one day, and we used to do it with the camporee, but we can't do that anymore. So laying the groundwork just so that some of these parents already know who we are. But we also have a new member coordinator. We used to call it the welcome wagon per head, and you should have somebody there ready to take care of all of these kinds of questions as people walk in off the street. With Be a Scout and all the things opening up now, we're getting people coming in like we did years ago, and it's a good thing.
And it also,
Get onto that because that's fantastic. There's definitely, that particular role within the organization. One of the things that I would say too about the actual meeting itself, it's kind of an all hands on deck kind of meeting, in my opinion. You bring out everybody from an adult leadership perspective that can participate.
People are coming together to make this program successful. Whereas if it's one person standing up front, their mind might trickle back into why are they the only?
We always bring up in this new parent meeting where the parents can help. We talk about committee positions. We talk about ASM positions. We talk about how
we're gonna real quick. So the next topic would be like the things you need to cover with them, and then the final is the soft sell of like, hey, we can't do this without you, which is the slide I just kind of showed you. So Joe, definitely on the agenda of that meeting, familiar with the group. The dynamic makes sense to them. They know where they're needed and how they can help. So there's some slides in here that I don't know, actually real quick, I don't know how much time we have. This is a, key facilitator tools is like, you wouldn't go and like turn on the fire hose, feed them water for 10 minutes and then go, I'm sorry, did you get too much? And then you won't know where they missed. Ray's laughing at me, but drink from the fire hose is a corporate lingo term, but it's a very visual thing that you can picture these poor parents trying to do with us. So some things that I've taken from people know what a Scoutmaster does. They don't know, they can kind of figure out who a committee chair is, but we want to make sure that these folks feel included and that there's no reason for them to feel like they couldn't join this group. We're cool. We just need them to know that we're cool. So any thoughts on that? Or any other barriers you might notice? Plan on when you're having those conversations about cost and fees and calendar that whoever's presenting that can answer those questions more or less on the fly. Nobody really wants to be told, hey, let me get back to you on that, because you might lose them.
Here is, the parents are coming into the organization are looking for answers to, but right. The subset of that is what value are they getting for the investment that they're making?
Feedback, all the things. I totally 100% agree that that's important, especially if we have parents that are joining right before rechartering time. I think one of the biggest challenges is we don't feel confident.
Yes, but what I would say though is that we also know there's going to be a range, right? So, and it's a small gap in the range generally, more or less, right?
Sure, that makes sense.
Okay, so there's nothing wrong with the fee and then things like that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not it's not a deal killer.
Exactly. I think, having those types of conversations, but you get those numbers from council at a reasonable enough cadence so that you can make those conversations more accurate. So, yeah. So the other topic is when you're doing presentations like this, or you're pulling data from places outside of your unit. I mean, Sarah gave us some great templates. Make sure that this is curated to be as troop specific to your unit as possible. You want it to feel very personal, and that the choices they're making are based on your troop or your like gear, uniform, those types of topics. We're just gonna real quick. I'll show you the slides I put together. I don't necessarily think that we as a group, as active scouters, probably need to go through every line on them, but as far as the application process, I'm typically very clear with them that there's a scout application. I also ask that every adult in my unit, whether they are actually a member of the committee or the Scoutmasters Corps, takes youth protection training. I don't know how many times I've previous to making that kind of a suggestion / recommendation. We all know that's all happened to every one of us, I can imagine. And then when it keeps happening, I keep changing it back and having to have conversations.
Joe just in the chat posted that Troop 285 has a code of conduct.
Okay,
That's a
yeah,
good
whatever.
call out. I think most troops have codes of conduct that they sign, so maybe we should add that to the list somewhere. I think.
I'll make a note here so that I can update it, because I'm OC application, but previously it was a totally separate form. So anything like that your troop has, actually that's part of the curating it to be specific for your troop. So.
Thanks for the call, Joe.
Oh, thank you, Joe. I do appreciate that, because mine were always like the same weekend. But whatever that looks like, if you have a calendar of events you can use as an example. We're also looking to kind of express a variety of outings. You want your kids to, not every kid is a backpacker. Not every kid, whatever your troop does to get kids to summer camp. Having those conversations is important right here. Apparently I can't spell generally. So we talk a little bit about high adventures. Sorry about that. We talk about high adventures with our new parents just so that they're not concerned when there's outings that their new scout might not be able to go on, but we want to get them excited and showcase a broad and a diverse program look like, and why they're possibly more expensive, potentially farther away. There's different types of adventures their kid may be absolutely excited about. And then other things you want to talk about during time expectations is any kind of, I do a soft sell at this point, but I'm like, hey, if your scout takes on a youth leadership role.
Yeah, Stephanie, you think might be a good place to mention service projects and community service?
Absolutely. I'm going to write that down, because again, changing this, but I sign probably 2 of those a month for scouts within my own unit. Like, hey, we did an hour of service for this group. Hey, we volunteered to do that. Can you sign it? Bob manages that for our troops, so that's why it's forefront in his brain. Yeah. So some other things we want to be super clear about, as clear as mud, as Sarah pointed out, on some kids, essentially, we want to make sure that they're seeing their kids having a good time, experiencing new things, growing in their own leadership potential, stepping outside their comfort zone. So if somebody's in a financial hardship situation, so I don't know that there's any of us that would want a scout to not do scouting if it was simply a financial situation. So
one of the things that I've done over the years is just done a little research to see what 5 days at Sky Y Camp for the YMCA, which is like $1,500 and it's long. That's the beauty of scouting, is because it's like, individual advancement, but also part of the group, and it's a fantastic opportunity. And the bang for
community-based activities these kids can be doing, churches, church youth groups, and we don't want to pull them away from the ones that are adding value to their lives, but we want to make sure that people understand these parents walk away from this meeting or conversations with you.
In the chat, Gary, did you want to come on and explain what you meant to put in the chat?
Sure. All I was saying is there's many, but as the chairman over scouting in the American Legion, I have a budget set aside for a lot of kids to help, especially those who cannot.
Perfect. So in addition to scouts or costs and fees, we all know that there's some additional topics we have to cover. Some of them are sticky, some of them are much easier to deal with. So the scouting uniform is a very, we picked up at Goodwill or whatnot. So no guarantee on where the patches are, if the patches are right, but you at least have a shirt. And then also understand that each troop kind of without shop to get going, because the shipping costs are killing me too. I have 5 people in my household in uniforms and working at summer camps. Crazy. So anyway, our uniform creates value through our community. It creates a sense of belonging to something. It doesn't matter if you're not wearing your Puma t-shirt, you're not wearing some ratty old pair of shorts or basketball shorts if you're in full uniform. So it commands, as Bob said, mentioned, hockey teams wear uniforms, lacrosse teams wear uniforms, the military wears uniforms. You are recognized as a group, and therefore you will start to take on the traits of a group. And then it represents in Scout book, and I don't have one handy right here. Normally I do. But the Scout book is a record for Scouts. It is a lesson book for certain Scouts. It tracks so many different things. And so we try as a let's say, new Scout joining your troop from afar, you get these kids and they start opening up that book, and it just opens up their world to Scout skills, character development, everything that they need to know to be a good moves, all those types of things. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on how they deliver this message on the uniform and the Scout book, or if they have any lessons learned when they're onboarding these parents. And as many as possible to step up and take on a supporting role, even if it's minor. I typically like to break out if I'm doing a big parent meeting and there's some Scouters that are present from the Cub Scout pack, or they're coming over and they're familiar with the program.
And a cheapy tent. Tell them, $35 at Big Five. If it breaks in a year, you get another one. So we give them that basic stuff and say, now you need to pass this around to answer.
I wish I would have known he needed this, because he's got a Christmas or a birthday or other, gift giving holiday that we could have, included that with. So yeah, definitely whatever your troops minimum, these parents know what these kids need, so that they can also reach out and say, I can't meet this minimum requirement. I need some help, locating this or this. We know we can set them up for success by knowing that in advance, as opposed to having
gear or things that don't fit and whatever. So then do an exchange. I think that's fantastic.
And then Kelly also mentioned that it's his understanding, and it's my understanding as well, that there will serve at the same time. So
Tucson has a Scout shop.
Some days I think that I was already driving 45 minutes to Bass Pro Shop. What's another 45 minutes to Tucson? So it is a Kelly. I know. I'm so sorry. Well, let me know what you need.
I can get to the council in 2 hours.
Yeah.
Get to Tucson is another 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then we all giggle behind our hands when we say that. But I consider, whenever I do this, I try and break them into 2 groups. Like I said, I have transitioning cub leaders. Those guys are typically very easy to, volunteer before they talk to their senior patrol leader. I was talking to another gentleman, has a big old t-shirt he wears, the keep calm and ask your SPL. Loving that. I'm going to need to buy one of those. Scouts stay with us a little bit longer. I don't know what the retention rate is, but I know that it's higher than those kids whose parents or leaders disappear on them once they get to their troops. So some things to consider covering in that many, getting copies of their medical ABC forms and getting them over to the new unit, covering any questions, obviously. So for the rest of the group, these are all the new parents who are at this point probably a little glassy-eyed, and I can do a one-on-one conversation with them later on to ask for volunteers in specific ways. I like the talent survey because it helps to define a skill set. It helps to point out ways our volunteers can help support us on our website, or handle our digital calendar, help support our scribe who is, struggling to load the calendar, or if somebody's great at photos, maybe they're going to handle our photo site, and they're going to get, the average Scout volunteer gives 20 hours of service a month, and that 96% of our volunteers say they would recommend volunteering BSA to other adults. Why I put that in there is because obviously we all giggle at the hour a week. So it's a growth opportunity for some of your leaders as well. And then make sure that they are fully aware that our troops are grateful for any time that they can provide, and that if they can't give, we as collective, as Joe pointed out, cannot give a full
years so that the rest are not overloaded.
One of my committee chair used to be in a pack where she had like 9 roles, and they walked into their parent meeting at one point. They're like, and she was YLT and wood badge where you're tossing a bunch of balls at this poor person. Like, somebody come take one. Taking one relieves that stress and that burden. So Judy, did you have comment, query, question?
I was just thinking it generally help when they get asked. But some people don't let it go because they think they're the only ones that can do it the right way. So it's a tough balance.
I'm going to say yes. You have to ask.
Yeah, and sometimes people feel, are they going to take on a leadership role for a long term, or is it going to be a project that's kind of a start and stop?
Progressing from there, having a plan to offer position training, that's a good one. Parents that don't know what to do or where to start, have them work with a person kind of a mirror. I think that's on the online offerings. That's a start. Got a mentor with hands-on. That's a good point. And then also ask
Shannon had,
activities. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So Shannon had 2 points. She said it helps to advertise what position will absolutely be the committee secretary, and then other people are more ready to commit to those smaller activities. Whether it's like, hey, you're going to be on the blue and gold committee, and the only thing you're going to have to worry about is decorate, comments, suggestions of their own, because nobody wants to feel like they're in a silo without any kind of support. Like if they are struggling to, I don't know how much to spend on paper plates and napkins. Who do I go to ask what my budget is? Like honestly, off the Boy Scout National Frequently Asked Questions page, but these might be some questions that you're going to run into that you'll want to have answers to. So running through that frequently asked questions list just to know, what does that mean I have to attend church? Is my kid going to need to pray? What if I'm not comfortable with that? Like answering those questions and being comfortable with your answer so that you can own that, that answer. The boys be together. What does it mean to be a linked troop? I don't understand if they're doing outings together. How do you keep them separate? What is the expectation? How do we handle, when to mix and when not to mix? Concept of this all put together. He himself is a scoutmaster or an assistant scoutmaster, I can't remember, within a female unit with a scout. Obviously that's a female, but he talks about like we have to, I will read you the topics of discussion. It's like regular camping, like what are the transportation activities, campfire, what does roses and thorns mean? There's a glossary of terms in here, so when their kid comes back and says, "Oh, when you printed this," but when if you're handing out this book to anyone, you might want to clarify that like dues are different with every unit and every location. But I just encourage you guys to use scouting feedback. I would love to hear it. That's the only way any of us gets better at doing this or making presentations. So if you have any questions about the book, the link right there takes you to the books a little bit. So it's nice to have a book like this that helps me answer the questions that I don't know, that they don't know. It's become so rote for most of us to like know this information. We don't know what to tell them in advance. So if you guys have any questions, comments, queries, Mark, go ahead.
Mr. Davis.
Oh, hi there. Good evening, Mr. Cruz and Ms. Russell. One comment, if you see it, where some groups are a little bit maybe more militaristic or maybe a little bit more male only and no moms, and sometimes there's just traditions that kind of come through at different units. The balance of how do I keep my kid in this prior activity, but then engage in this new activity? How do I forge that kind of this plus that? And is it trying to encourage folks to only contribute a partial amount, but yet you want them to be all in, but at the same time you want to try to meet them where they're at? I'll go back to mute.
Hard choices growing up through scouting and some things like he never got to go through an NYLT because he always had a tournament on Memorial Day weekend, which is when NYLT starts, and he had one over Christmas week, the week after Christmas when our NYLT is held in the winter. So like you want a scout to be a scout, not necessarily a true 3365 scout if that's not the best fit for them. So
and putting on, I wouldn't say a good show, but having a good show of what's going on and putting that kind of charisma and that uniqueness out to the world and to the parents. So it's your truth and what you bring and uniqueness around that. So it's fantastic. Thank you.
And as part of like the Weeblos, I present this more in the Weeblos transition to scouting. Geronimo, every year like clockwork, there is idiosyncrasies between troops that will call to certain scouts. And we need to make sure that we're not pigeonholing scouts into a specific unit just because.
Speaking as a Cub Master, I have really pushed this last year for our senior Weeblos den leaders to have we frequently have friends or acquaintances that we're able to refer to a troop that's closer to them or that fits their schedule better. So I just thank you for saying that was previously happening. Because I have a really good relationship with a couple of other troops and packs in the area, and I'm like, hey,
a troop. When the new parents come in, whether they're with scouting or brand new to scouting, one thing that we try to say is, you can help the troop greatly by just donating that out, and they're all excited. you have at least 3 adults, and they're there anyway because they brought their scout with them. So we kind of push that, and then that kind of snowballs because, you know, in the last 4 or 5 years that has happened, and we've had our scouts help us advance the troop, just as a thought.
Those are great, like what the one-off kind of one-time things, like, hey, you're going to get you on the committee. And then the next step is like they're at a committee meeting and they're comfortable volunteering for something. As you plant that seed early on with those 10 and a half and 11-year-old scout parents, and then by the time their kid's 15 or 16, they're ready to step up and be that committee chair as that poor committee chair's kid ages out or has aged out. So we can ditch out whatever.
We need to find out, does anybody have anything that they want to chat about, or any additional comments, or is there anything that, you know, has really worked in any of the subjects of the.
So I just started a new unit, and within a week, and the parents, we pretty much just gave them a deadline. And if they have that deadline, we used to say yes.
Interesting.
And it worked. I got a new unit in a week. So
wow.
I need you to come do that at my troop cage. Back on that.
Doing this and having fun as patrols, and the Weevils get to see that hands-on. And because our pack would require at least one parent for each kid that would come along, every year for the last 25 years, sometimes up to 3-4 turkeys. So again, if we could figure out some way the Weevils could spend to get to see Camp Geronimo, it's you know, it's been a handicap this year actually not being able to do that, and that's just my 2 cents.
If you're covered, you're good to go. But encouraging those or new scouts to come out and do an outing with your group, Bob, is an ideal way for those scouts to get to know and get out on those outings, the better. As a side note, the only thing I want to remind you all is there comes September 1, you guys might have heard the new requirement that if an adult leader or a teacher about documentation, that adult leader application will, if you just make it a part of the standard expectation of your parents, it won't become an issue. But any scout or any parent that's going to spend the night, whether they're driving, has to not. Yeah.
Fee position, right?
It's a fee position. Yeah. And there was another question, like, if you have pack or you're dual enrolled on both sides, a parent.
Thank you.